Example 6, using the quadratic formula when we contain non-real complex solutions. So if we take a look at our example here, we have 2x squared equals x minus 4. We want to set this equal to 0, so we're going to subtract the x to the left side and we're going to add 4 to the left side. So that means ultimately we're going to get 2x squared minus x plus 4, and then we're going to set that equal to 0. Okay. Now remember that we want to look at the standard form in order to use the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula, for the standard form, we have ax squared plus bx plus c, which is equal to 0. So what do we determine that a equals in our problem? Well, a equals positive 2. B is going to equal negative 1. And that's why it's important to subtract that x to the left side of the equation, so we know that b is equal to negative 1. And then c is going to equal positive 4. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and use that quadratic formula. Now let's write out the formula, because we know it's x, which is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And we're going to divide that by 2a. Okay, so let's plug in the values of a, b, and c into the quadratic formula. So we have a negative, the value of b is negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared is, b is negative 1. We're going to square that, minus 4 times the value of a, which is 2, times the value of c, which is 4, divided by 2 times a, which is 2. Now let's simplify this a little further. So a negative times a negative 1 gives us a positive 1, and that's going to be plus or minus the square root of, well, negative 1 squared is positive 1, minus 4 times 2, which is 8. 8 times 4 gives us 32. And then we're going to divide that by 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and simplify this a little further. So we have 1 plus or minus the square root of, well, 1 minus 32 is negative 31 divided by 4. So let's go ahead and then continue that over here. So we have x, which is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 31 divided by 4. Now keep in mind that the square root of negative 31 needs to be simplified using the imaginary number. So we know that this is the same thing as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 31. And the square root of negative 1 is I, so that's the square root of I times the square root of 31. You can also write the I after the square root of 31, but you need to make sure that it's outside of the radical sign if you do that. So this means that this is going to equal 1 plus or minus the square root of 31I divided by 4. So now let's go ahead and then rewrite this as a solution set. So we have 1 over 4 plus or minus the square root of 31 over 4i. That's the simplified version. Or the longer version would be 1/4 minus the square root of 31 over 4i, comma, 1 over 4 plus the square root of 31 over 4i. And therefore, those are the solutions to this quadratic formula. And because it contains an imaginary number, then this is considered a non-real complex solutions.